Hey, folks, what's up? Let's get into the end of Western civilization, shall we? I swear to you, by the end of this, I'm doing something different. I'm doing something a little unusual. I'm going to spend probably this entire live stream, this entire episode on one analysis, one article. But here's the thing, you got to trust me on this because here's the thing, by the end of it, or even fucking halfway through it, you will understand why we're witnessing, how we're witnessing the end of Western civilization, the yeah, really the end of Western civilization, at least as we know it, at least in the way we know it, and you will have a better understanding of the deeper understanding of the deeper reality of so many things, of the proxy war in Ukraine, of the new Cold War against Russia and China, of why people's lives are being gutted and destroyed across America, across the EU and the UK. You're going to understand all of that. I promise you. So just bear with me, hang in there, and we're going to have a good time learning about the end of Western civilization. Listen, if there's one thing you get from me, it's a good time learning about the end times. That's what I am. I'm a good time learning about the end times. But there's so much in this analysis that you're not going to get from your other talking heads, your other independent journalists, etc. I mean, you certainly won't get it from your mainstream journalists. Jesus Christ, the shit they're doing. But so that being said, let's get into it. Thank you for being here. This is called Moment of Clarity. It's my live stream. I do them every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday at noon Eastern. Friday is for members only at leecamp.net. But let's get into it. So this article is coming from Michael Hudson. Michael Hudson is an excellent economist. He really is willing to go where most economists are not, where most of your mainstream media is not willing to go, what all your mainstream media is not willing to go. He really gets at the deeper issues. And so if you haven't heard of him, you should definitely check him out. And this article that he put up just a few days ago, it's titled The End of Western Civilization. And it's a long article, but some of the key points, they just clarify everything. And much of it, various points of it I've covered over these past few weeks since the proxy war started. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. So he starts out with some history of other empires and how they ended up and why they ended up that way and how America is doing the exact same shit. As many of the ones that have collapsed. But so he starts out by saying the greatest challenge facing societies has always been, and I think he means largely capitalist societies. Maybe it's just more quickly exploited in capitalist society, but has always been how to conduct trade and have credit without letting merchants and creditors make money by exploiting their customers and debtors. How to stop. How to allow merchants and crediting without massive exploitation. That's one of the biggest questions. He says, all antiquity recognized that the drive to acquire money is addictive, you think, and indeed tends to be exploitative and hence socially injurious. Yes, it does cause social injury. Before you know it, your society is like, I pulled a hammy. Oh, I think that was my groin muscle that they went after. The moral values, he says, of most societies opposed selfishness above all in the form of avarice and wealth addiction, which the Greeks called philargyria, love of money, silver mania. Individuals and families indulging in conspicuous consumption tended to be ostracized because it was recognized that wealth often was obtained at the expense of others, especially the weak. Yeah, remember that? I've read about this. I've never actually seen it. There was a time where rich people were like looked down upon. Like you'd be, because you saw someone exceedingly rich and you were like, wow, I bet they beat the shit out of someone. It'd be like spotting someone just, fucking whipping, like had a team of dogs pulling him on a sled. There's no snow. He's like on the streets of New York in the summertime, and he's on a skateboard. And a team of dogs that's not like sled dogs. They're like, which is also much of that's also abusive, I think. But it's like a team of like Shih Tzus or something. It's just like wiener dogs. It's like 12 wiener dogs, and the guy is just whipping the shit out of them. That's how we should look at every rich person we see walk by. It should be like, wow, you are a shithead. You've achieved your forward momentum on the sled of life by beating the shit out of others. And there was a time in many societies where that's how people viewed the exceedingly rich. He says, what did not seem likely 250 years ago, 2,500 years ago, was that a warlord aristocracy would conquer the Western world. That's what we're in right now, a warlord aristocracy. In creating what became the Roman Empire, an oligarchy took control of the land and, in due course, the political system. It abolished royal or civic authority, shifted the fiscal burden onto the lower classes, and ran the population and industry into debt. But running the population, industry, and even governments into debt to an oligarchic elite is precisely what has occurred in the West, which is now trying to impose the modern variant of this debt-based economic regime. U.S.-centered neoliberal finance capitalism on the entire world. We're taking something that is crushing our society, that is harming individuals, and we're trying to enforce it around the globe with U.S. hegemony. We're trying to make sure other countries do the exact same awful fucking system that we have, where you end up with just insane inequality. You end up in one of the richest countries in the world with a million people living in tents or living under bridges. You end up with one of the richest countries in the world and one of the worst health systems in the world, one of the richest countries in the world and the worst fucking public transit for a rich country, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because there's immense inequality. And we try and enforce that on the rest of the world. He says that is what today's new Cold War is all about. And we're about to get into that, into the details of this. Today, a financialized system of oligarchic control whose roots lead back to Rome is being supported and indeed imposed by U.S. new Cold War diplomacy, military force, and economic sanctions on countries seeking to resist it. Obviously, I've covered that a ton. The economic sanctions, which is really economic war, done on any country that tries to even slightly resist us. Even slightly push back again, like a gentle, like old lady push back against the American empire, and we coup them, we assassinate them, we economically war them, which is not the right way to use that language, but that's what I'm doing right now. That's just happening to economically war them. Anyway. Rome's aristocrats created an anti-democratic constitution and senate, which is what aristocrats do, right? Aristocrats don't want democracy, so they create an anti-democratic system, and they go, it's a democracy. It looks like a democracy to me. I think it's a democracy, right? Right now in the United States, you have a system, which my favorite study, the 2014 large Princeton study showed, is an oligarchy, that nothing happens that the average Americans want unless it aligns with corporate interests. Meaning average Americans, those of us who are not the ruling class, fucking get nothing. Nothing that doesn't align with corporate interests. We live in inverted totalitarianism ruled by the anonymous corporate state. And so, but meanwhile, as we live underneath that, they go, welcome to democracy. Welcome to the greatest democracy the world has ever seen. That's what this is, right? Can't you tell? Can't you tell, as we do absolutely nothing that you people have ever wanted, unless it already aligns with our corporate interests? And my favorite example is Obamacare, right? Well, Obamacare was something positive for the people. It covered certain people that didn't have any health insurance, got some health insurance, right? There you go. Well, yeah, but that's still aligned with corporate interests because it was a massive giveaway to the insurance companies. If you wanted to just cover everybody, you could have had single payer. You could have had the type of health system that all developed countries in the world have, except the United States. Anyway, Rome's aristocrats created an anti-democratic constitution and Senate and laws that made debt bondage and the consequent loss of lands irreversible. Although the politically correct ethic was to avoid engaging in commerce and money lending, right? That's why my people, traditionally speaking, the Jews, were told to be the money lenders because it was dirty for the others. So my people were sent to do the money lending or whatever because you ethically you would never want to be involved in that, right? To continue from his article, this ethic did not prevent an oligarchy from emerging to take over the land and reduce much of the population to bondage. What distinguishes Western economies, he means present day Western economy. Oh, maybe it means earlier. Western economies from earlier Near Eastern and most Asian societies is the absence. Oh, no, he means modern. Modern Western economies from earlier Near Eastern and most Asian societies is the absence of debt relief to restore economy-wide balance. So he says every Western nation has inherited from Rome the pro-creditor sanctity of debt principles that prioritize the claims of creditors and legitimize the permanent transfer to creditors of the property of defaulting debtors. This reminds me of the United States is one of the only countries with cash bail, making it almost impossible for poor people to get out of jail. This is in the U.S. If you are in debt, it will chase you your whole life. If you are in student debt, it will chase you from the time you're just a little kid, just a little lad of 17, 18, and you sign your name on that. I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to spend all this money on schooling, but I'll have plenty of money later. And then you don't become a doctor and then you don't have the plenty of money. And then you just fucking chased by that your whole life. The U.S. is one of the worst on this. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other Western economies. It does, but he's making the point that in most of these Asian societies, when push came to shove, when they had tough times, when inequality got too extreme, there was debt forgiveness, which you'll know Biden ran on, right? He said, hey, we're going to forgive some of that student loan debt. Or let me rephrase. He said, we're going to forgive some of the... And then he forgot his words and choked on the microphone, and they had to send people in to try and give him the Heimlich and get the microphone, coughed up. It's ugly. It's ugly. Anyway, he ran on the idea that there would be some student loan debt forgiveness, but there has not been at all. This has caused domestic austerity and led oligarchies to seek prosperity through foreign conquest, to gain from foreigners what is not being produced by domestic economies driven into debt and subject to pro-creditor legal principles, transferring land and other property to a rentier class. So this is how the U.S. or many empire capitalist societies gain their wealth is they extract from other areas. Once they have indebted their own people, and maybe even before, they extract from other areas around the world. So the U.S., having heavily extracted from our own citizens, having destroyed many of the lives of our own citizens, is now, and has before, this is a continuation, extracting from other societies, other countries, and bending them to our will, as we've done for generations. Go read Smedley Butler if you want to learn about just how much our imperialist fucking boots on the ground have done to further the extraction from various countries. But anyway, he's talking about how heavily our system is set up to be pro-creditor. It is very pro the ruling class. And now you're seeing kind of the end game. You're seeing the dominoes falling as we extract everything around the world. But he gets into a little more history. Don't worry, we'll get to modern times here in a moment. But I think this history is just so fucking important. Britain followed a similar rise and fall. World War I left it with heavy arms debts owed to its own former colony, the United States, imposing anti-labor austerity at home. So anti-labor laws that harm average workers, average laborers, right? Anti-labor austerity at home in seeking to pay these debts. Britain's sterling area subsequently became a satellite of the U.S. dollar under the terms of the American Lend-Lease in World War II and the 1946 British loan. The neoliberal policies of Margaret Thatcher, good old Maggie or Marge or whatever she went by, Thatcher and Tony Blair sharply increased the cost of living by privatizing, monopolizing public housing and infrastructure, wiping out Britain's former industrial competitiveness by raising the cost of living and hence wage levels. So for those of you in Britain who talk about how shitty it is there, there's some of your history. Many of you who are there probably already knew that. But I think many Americans don't understand that Britain has already gone through what we're now like seeing in the U.S. The United States has followed a similar trajectory of imperial overreaching at the cost of its domestic economy. Its overseas military spending from 1950 onwards, such as Vietnam, forced the dollar off gold in 1971. That shift had the unanticipated benefit of ushering in a dollar standard. Well, benefit created by Kissinger. Henry Kissinger came up with it, and they were like, well, instead of the gold standard, let's create the petrodollar. The dollar standard that has enabled the U.S. economy and its military diplomacy to get a free ride from the rest of the world by running up dollar debt to other nations' central banks without any practical constraint. This is how the U.S. just spends $1 trillion a year on the U.S. military, and fucking no one can touch it and no one can compete with it because we uniquely are able to just fucking print wildly all of the money we want, not give a flying fuck about debt, whereas other countries have to care about their debt. The financial colonization of the Soviet Union, of the post-Soviet Union in the 1990s. So, without getting into the weeds on this, Soviet Union collapses and the U.S. immediately jumps in and says, "Oh, you're capitalist now, and you should sell all your stuff to us and various Western countries." And they put Yeltsin into, or they made sure Yeltsin stayed in office. There's a lot of interesting history there. Yeltsin was our guy, right? And he basically was selling off the Soviet Union to the capitalist countries, which Russia is very capitalist now and has been since the fall of the Soviet Union. So Michael Hudson says the financial colonization, we basically economically colonized the Soviet Union in the 1990s by the shock therapy of privatization giveaways, followed by China's admission to the World Trade Organization, the WTO, in 2001, with the expectation that China would, like Yeltsin's Russia, become a U.S. financial colony, led America's economy to deindustrialize by shifting employment to Asia. We also thought that Putin was going to be a Yeltsin, just the same as Yeltsin. When Putin came into power, he was kind of hand-selected by Yeltsin, and we thought that the U.S. ruling class thought, oh, he's going to do the same shit. He'll just sell off all of Russia. And for a while, we were on really good terms with Putin, right? In fact, they joked about how Russia used to be an enemy and is no longer and all that stuff. But then Putin had a shift and he started defending Russia's interests. And this is not to say I fucking agree with everything Putin does, but you got to understand this history. Let's see. The U.S. financial colony led America's economy to deindustrialize. So we started sending all the jobs to Asia, right? Because corporations, and this is how capitalism works, corporations will go wherever the cheapest workers are. Hey, that guy will work for fucking 3 cents. All right, let's send the work to him. He can make our stuff. That guy. They got to put up suicide nets because people don't even want to be working at the prices they're working at there. That sounds perfect. That sounds great. Can I have a tour of the suicide nets? They sound unique. They sound unique and exciting. Capitalism will go wherever things are fucking cheapest. To continue from Michael Hudson, trying to force submission to U.S. control by inaugurating today's new Cold War has led Russia, China, and other countries to break away from the dollarized trade and investment system, leaving the U.S. and NATO Europe to suffer austerity and deepening wealth inequality as debt ratios are soaring for individuals, corporations, and government bodies. It was only a decade ago that Senator John McCain and Barack Obama characterized Russia as merely a gas station with atom bombs. And now Michael Hudson says that could now be said of the United States. Fucking yeah, we are. Gas station with atom bombs. God, if that doesn't sum it up. We're not just a gas station. We got a little more than gas, all right. We have a fucking there's a cheesecake factory. We're a cheesecake factory with atom bombs. We got that what is that? That's there's a Panera Bread down on the corner there, and also we produce Twinkies, and we there's an Olive Garden. We're an Olive Garden with fucking atom bombs. A gas station with atom bombs. Jesus Christ! If that doesn't hit where it hurts, that's like a roast. That's like a Don Rickles roast comic line where the U.S. goes, "Oh, he got me. He got me good because it's so fucking accurate." Oh, that stings. Michael Hudson says that can now be said of the United States, basing its world economic power on control of the West's oil trade, while its main export surpluses are agricultural crops and weapons. The U.S. is now attempting to live mainly off financial gains, interest, profits on foreign investment, and central bank credit creation to inflate capital gains instead of creating wealth through its own labor and industry. We don't create shit anymore. We don't. What do we make? We don't create wealth anymore. We don't build things. There's no Americans like hammered. What do we create? We create fucking Instagram posts of a woman in a thong and, maybe somebody juggling puppies. We don't really. What do we fucking create? Bad celebrities and music that all sounds the same. Create a lot of prisoners. There you go. We create that. We create the most fucking prisoners in the world. So there's that. We create depression. We have the most people taking antidepressants in the world. We create opioid epidemic. There's something, right? I think we make a lot of the world's meth. So yeah, who is he to say we don't make shit? We make shit. We make depression. We make addiction. Create prisoners. Let's see. The United States is now attempting to live mainly off financial gains instead of creating wealth. Its Western allies seek to do the same. They euphemize, not euthanize, but they euphemize the U.S.-dominated system as globalization. Sounds so much nicer, doesn't it? U.S.-dominated global fascist hegemony. Sounds not so bad if you go globalization. Why? That sounds delightful. I'll have a little globalization. Yes, that sounds lovely. What was that? By globalization, you mean a U.S. Cock up your ass? Oh, I was unaware that's what that word means. They euphemize the US dominated system as globalization, but it is simply a financial form of colonialism, backed with the usual military threat of force and covert regime change to prevent countries from withdrawing from the system. And I mean, doesn't that sum up of why we have fucking overturned so many countries, destroyed countries? I mean, there's the most obvious ones like fucking, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. There's all that, and then there's the ones we tried to overturn or have created regime change there. Chile, Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti. The list goes on and on. Of course, all across Africa, and these are all basically designed to force people to our will. It doesn't mean we have to like literally own them. We don't have to do to every country what we did to Iraq. We just make sure there is someone that is remotely or mostly U.S. positive, bending over to U.S. desires, giving us a great deal on the trade and the exports that we buy from them, indebting them. Anyway, this U.S. and NATO-based imperial system seeks to indebt weaker countries and force them to turn control over their policies to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. You've heard me talk about them a lot. Obeying the neoliberal, anti-labor, meaning anti-worker, advice of these institutions leads to a debt crisis that forces the debtor countries' foreign exchange rate to depreciate. The IMF then, quote unquote, rescues them from insolvency on the conditionality that they sell off the public domain and shift taxes off the wealthy, especially foreign investors, onto the workers. So I love this. This is what the IMF and the World Bank always do. And the IMF and the World Bank depict themselves, go around the world and tell everybody that they are saviors of poor countries, right? They are there to help. They go in and they say, we're going to help you, right? And what they do exactly what he just said. They give them anti-labor, neoliberal advice. It's like the mafia giving you advice, right? The mafia comes up, fucking the hitman comes up and he goes, I'd like to give you a little advice that, perhaps you should sell your cars at your car dealership to us half price. A little advice from us. Perhaps a couple of boxes of those watches you've been selling go missing off the back of your truck. They fall off the back of your truck. Who knows why? It's a bumpy road out there. It's a bumpy road, and a couple of those boxes fall off the truck tonight. Just a little advice for you about the bumpy roads. And so they give the advice. And if you don't follow the advice, then the U.S. and the IMF and the World Bank will fucking crush you. And if you do follow the advice, then all of a sudden, your exchange rate depreciates. You're insolvent. You go bankrupt. These countries, end up completely fucked by IMF and World Bank. And then the IMF and the World Bank comes in. They go, "Hey, we hear you're having a rough time. My goodness, I know you took our advice, and this is so odd. Normally, our advice works great, but I know you're having it turns out you're having a rough time, which is odd because, like I said, our advice always works. But yeah, you're having a rough time. You've gone bankrupt. You're insolvent. Your people are struggling. You need cash. You need cash quick. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna rescue you. We're gonna save you. It's straight up mafia. This is like the fucking rule book of the mob. You could get to the. It's like the fucking Gotti family wrote the instruction manual for the IMF and the World Bank. This is exactly what they do. And so they get various things. The country will put in all this austerity, shift the taxes away from the wealthy investors, the international investors. They'll do all that shit. But sometimes it's other little bonuses, such as, was it Ecuador? Yeah, Ecuador, right? So Julian Assange had been given Ecuadorian citizenship, right? He had holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, and the empire, meaning U.S., U.K. empire, couldn't get to him because it was sovereign territory of Ecuador. Couldn't get in there, couldn't arrest him, couldn't torture him, couldn't put him in solitary confinement. And they hated it. They were fucking livid. And so they make a deal. When Moreno gets into office in Ecuador, they make a deal with him. And all of a sudden he says, you know what, UK police, you go on in there. You go on in and you kidnap Julian Assange for nothing. And you arrest him for being the most accurate journalist who has maybe ever lived. And you do that. And so they go running in there. And you know what? Within days, Ecuador gets a loan from the IMF for billions of dollars. Within days. So just another example of how exactly this system works. Oligarchy and debt are the defining characteristics of Western economies. America's foreign military spending and nearly constant wars have left its own treasury deeply indebted to foreign governments and their central banks. Of course, it doesn't matter. America's rising foreign debt has been sustained by its key currency privilege of issuing its own dollar debt under the dollar standard without other countries having any reasonable expectation of ever being paid, except in yet more dollars that the U.S. just fucking prints out of nowhere. Not backed by anything except backed by that triangular eyeball on the dollar. That's it. We're just backed by that eyeball. Whatever the fuck that Illuminati eyeball is on the dollar. That's it. That's all we're backed by. This monetary affluence has enabled Wall Street's managerial elite, basically Wall Street, to increase America's rentier overhead by financialization and privatization. Anytime you hear the word privatization, means selling it off, right, to corporate interests. That's taking things that were formerly public, such as the public transit or public commons, or you can go down the list: schools, mail service, whatever, and it sells it to corporate interests. So that's every time you hear privatization. Sometimes it's oil, sometimes it's other resources. Increase America's rentier overhead by financialization, privatization, increasing the cost of living and doing business, much as occurred in Britain under the neoliberal policies of Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair. Industrial companies have responded by shifting their factories to low-wage economies to maximize profits. So the companies then respond by going overseas for just about everything. But as America deindustrializes with rising import dependency on Asia, U.S. diplomacy is pursuing a new Cold War that is driving the world's most productive economies to decouple from U.S. economic orbit, to separate from the U.S. economic orbit. We're actually writing our own obituary, which is, kind of hilarious if you're not one of the people suffering under it. By the way, folks, in a few minutes, this will continue only at rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's rumble.com/Lee Camp. If you're watching there, you won't have to change anything. It'll keep going. And so in a few minutes, that will happen. Please take a second to hit the thumbs up no matter where you're watching, and hit subscribe no matter where you're watching. And it's free to watch at Rumble. So I'm not saying the rest is behind a paywall. It's all over at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Anyway, let's keep going, though, because we're about to get to modern times in which you will understand everything that's going on now. America has polarized with extreme wealth concentrated at the top, while most of the economy is driven deeply into debt. And I don't have the exact numbers, but, it's a handful of guys, like 4 or 5 guys, actual men. I'm not just saying guys, but 4 or 5 dudes have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. The millions upon millions of people, whatever that is, 150, whatever, a million Americans have the same amount of wealth combined as like 5 or 6 dudes. How fucked is that? How wildly fucked is that? And then on top of that, the top 10% of Americans have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 80%. 80%. It's such an immense amount of inequality. And something that is not mentioned in this Michael Hudson article, although he does an amazing job, is that we're increasing, because of that inequality, we're increasingly getting to a plutonomy. So plutocracy is ruled by the wealthy, right? Which we've been in forever. By the way, in case you are unaware, George Washington was something like the 10th richest American at the time. So even going back to our earliest days, the rich motherfuckers were the ones that ruled things. But anyway, because of this immense wealth inequality, we're headed towards a plutonomy, which is an economy based on the wealthy, meaning it is far more consequential for our economy. We're getting there. Far more consequential what that top 10% do with their money, how they shift it around the world, than what the bottom 50%, 150 fucking million fucking people, do with their money. And when you get there, what little amount our system as a whole, the fucking umbrella system, cared about those people, it evaporates. Once you're to a point where even the economy doesn't care what the bottom 150 million people are doing, then why should it matter whether they have jobs, whether they're living under bridges, whether they're fucking scraping, whether they own homes, whether they're scraping, but none of it matters. None of it matters. So yes, we're getting increasingly polarized. The creditor 1% has become a politically powerful oligarchy despite nominal democratic political forms expanding voting rights. Yeah, and even him saying that is a bit of a stretch, because while they expand voting rights, and obviously we had civil rights a generation ago, it happened for black people got the vote, and etc. And women got to vote. That was both of those were several generations back. But we also had civil rights, which was supposed to defend the right to vote in new ways. And even though we have that, those votes don't actually matter, as I've talked about. It largely don't matter. I think as I've talked about many times, they matter on the local level. They matter maybe a little bit on the state level. But federally, you're choosing between the two people that are owned by corporate America. The two people that spend the most on the election win. I don't have enough fingers, but win 100% of the 2-0. Let's see if I take all right, this is a 1 and this is that 100. You can totally see that with my hands right there. They win 100% of the time. The two fucking richest people in the election, meaning rich by corporate donations, win 100% of the time. And then the person who spends the most, meaning one rich person, rich campaign-wise, spends more than the other fucking ruling class person. That person wins in the House. It's like 80-some%. I mean, sorry, in the Senate, it's 80-some%. And in the House, it's 90-some%. But so the creditor 1% has become a politically powerful oligarchy. Government regulatory agencies have been captured, and taxing people has been made regressive, leaving economic control and planning in the hands of a rentier elite. Aristotle recognized democracies as evolving more or less naturally into oligarchies. Yeah, you end up at an oligarchy kind of no matter what, which claim to be democratic, unless you get outside capitalism, which claim to be democratic for public relations purposes, while pretending that their increasingly top-heavy concentration of wealth is all for the best. Yeah, they pretend to be democratic. We're still democratic. It's still democracy. Yeah. Bullshit. This is a fucking oligarchy, a rule by an elite business class. President Biden and his State Department neoliberals accused China. So now we're getting closer to modern day. Accused China and any other country seeking to maintain its economic independence and self-reliance of being autocratic. What they call autocracy is a government strong enough to prevent a Western-oriented financial oligarchy from indebting the population to itself and then prying away its land and other property into its own hands and those of its American and other foreign backers. Essentially, any country we call autocratic and we start accusing them of human rights and all that shit, basically what we're saying, every time you hear that, every time Biden, Trump, fucking right-wingers, they're not left-wingers, but right-wingers or less right-wingers, anytime they walk out and go, this country is violating human rights, this country is autocratic, anytime you hear that, you should just translate it in your head, use the brain ball to translate it to this country is strong enough to stand up to us and is standing up to the American empire. That's all they're saying. And they say it over and over and over again. Every time you hear it, because the truth is, we don't fucking get the fucking U.S. government doesn't care about human rights. Are you kidding me? We're helping Saudi Arabia perpetrate the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now in Yemen. We are helping bomb and obliterate people around the world. We are killing hundreds of thousands with our economic wars in Venezuela and Iran and Syria and Afghanistan. More people are going to die in Afghanistan from our economic war on them right now than died from our bombs against them last year. We don't care about human rights. Are you fucking kidding me? Jesus Christ. Anytime you hear them say, we got to worry about this country's human rights, it means that the country is powerful enough to stand up to the U.S. empire. That doesn't mean that the country, whichever country, China, North Korea, whatever, Russia, Iran, it doesn't mean that country has no issues. It doesn't mean there can't be dickheads running some things in those countries. But what it really means, coming from the U.S. government, is that country is strong enough to stand up and fight back against us. And we want to exploit that country. We want to Swiss cheese them by grabbing their resources and bringing it to us. And when they don't give in to that, they're fucking autocracy. The Orwellian doublethink of calling oligarchies democracies is followed by defining a free market as one that is free for financial rent-seeking. Yeah. The Orwellian doublethink of calling oligarchies democracies. I mean, look at the shit that we call democracies. Fucking UK, US, Canada. These are all oligarchies, and yet we call them, democracies. So much of the EU is they're essentially oligarchies, but they're maybe less so than us. We're the top oligarchy, so we look worse by comparison. Hey guys, everything's going over to rumble.com. So if you're not there yet, go over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. You'll find this live stream right there at the top. The title of it is The End of Western Civilization. Also, please support my work at leecamp.net, where you'll get exclusive contents,